This evening, we have a special presentation, and it is my pleasure to introduce Englewood's Mayor, Michael Wildes, who I consider a friend. He's also a prominent New York City immigration attorney. He's been active in Englewood for many years, started as a city councilman beginning in 1998. He was elected mayor first in 2004. He served till 2010, then was elected mayor again in 2019. Before he became the managing partner of his own firm, Wildes and Weinberg, he served as a federal prosecutor for the Eastern District of New York. He's now currently also an adjunct professor at the Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law in New York. He has testified on Capitol Hill in connection with anti-terrorism legislation, and his law firm specializes exclusively in the practice of U.S. immigration and nationality law. Considering everything that's going on these days, and certainly in the communities immediately surrounding us, I thought it would be a good idea to invite the mayor, and he very graciously accepted the invitation to speak about immigrant rights, human rights, constitutional rights. His presentation will take approximately 15 or 20 minutes, at which point he will field some questions from the governing body. At the conclusion of the presentation and the questions from the governing body, he has agreed, if his time permits, to stick around. There's a public comments period, and as we do with all public comments period, every person can have a chance to pose a question or make a comment. We will group those together, one after another. People come, and then I will ask the mayor to answer the questions that have been posed. So that's our going-in approach. And Mayor Wildes, please come up to the podium there. Make sure that little green light is on, and the floor is yours. Thank you again.
There we go. Good evening, everybody. Excuse my back, ladies and gentlemen. Mayor Ziegler, Council President Ziegler, thank you so much for hosting me this evening, and I join in wishing you well and farewell to Frank Cirillo as well. Leonia is a very special place in my family. If you ask my wife, she sees me do my exercise in Leonia. As your mayor probably walks in Englewood, it's kind of like the witness protection program where you get to walk in somebody else's community, they don't complain to you. But it's been a real privilege to be a neighbor and to work with your mayor. He's a real gentleman. And we've been working on a lot of other concerns that warrant our attention together. Well, warrants, let's kind of talk about a very important subject, and that is U.S. immigration. If you look at our Constitution, if you appreciate what our founding documents and parents envisioned, we seem to be miles away in many ways what's being deployed on the streets of America, and it's very important that we get this right. We act within the rule of law and that we understand the situation. I'm going to be very specific, and I'll pull out the lens or the drone where necessary. To be clear, any warrant that's issued by ICE for the arrest or detention of somebody generally relies on administrative warrants when detaining non-citizens. Administrative warrants permit arrests in public spaces, not in private areas. I want you to know in the city of Englewood, we had a circumstance where a couple were at home. Somebody knocked on the door and said, "What is it?" "It's the police. We have gifts for your kids." They opened the door. They went in and arrested the father in front of the wife and the 5 children. The wife and the 5 children went to the Center for Food Action for food, told this to them, and they got on the telephone with me. There needs to be legal process, and if they don't understand the process, the residents of the city have to make better choices. They should never have opened the door. He could have been arrested in public space, but that intrusion into the home was a breach of not only etiquette, but the Constitution. ICE can stop anyone being questioned by an immigration officer or law enforcement. They have the right to remain silent, of course, under the Fifth Amendment. You can refuse to search a person, but they can only search you or your belongings without your consent if they have probable cause to do so. We also recommend that you not lie about your status when it comes to the actual foreign national or provide false documentation to an immigration officer, as it can make something bad already worse. With regard to detention, ICE is required to have a quote-unquote reason to believe that an individual has violated the immigration laws in order to detain them. The reason to believe equates with our concept of probable cause. Detained non-citizen are subject to either discretionary or mandatory detention. If it's discretionary, you can try to seek a bond from an immigration judge, and there's no bond eligibility if it's a mandatory detention. Mandatory detention applies to non-citizens who entered either via parole or considered to be quote-unquote arriving aliens, non-citizens with certain criminal convictions, and people who entered without inspection under the administration's reinterpretation of the Immigration Act. With regard to discretionary detention, these are for non-citizens who were previously inspected or admitted on a visa or overstays as they are. A non-citizen detained by ICE who has not been previously ordered removed cannot be removed from the United States without due process, which means a day in court before an immigration judge, having the opportunity to both challenge the charges of removability and seek relief. A lawful protest is permitted under our Constitution, under the state of New Jersey, and in a concept of a Western free democracy. Observation of ICE agents doing their job is permitted. It's not prohibited. It's illegal for an individual to obstruct or impede federal officials engaged in the lawful arrest or exercise of their duties. Obstruction generally requires some physical act for you to be accused of impeding. However, non-obstructive behavior, observation without obstruction, video recording shouting, is generally permitted under the First Amendment and cannot be lawfully prevented. Under the anti-commandeering doctrine of the 10th Amendment, federal government cannot compel local officials to enforce or support federal programs of law enforcement. While there's no obligation to aid, you cannot obstruct or hinder a lawful operation. There's the concept in the Immigration Act of Section 287G, which are voluntary partnerships between ICE, state and local law enforcement, which allows officers, police officers, to be designated immigration functions. 287G agreements are banned in the state of New Jersey under a 2019 Attorney General directive. In 2018, another directive banned New Jersey police from stopping, questioning, searching, or detaining based on suspected immigration status. These directives were enshrined in law by Governor Sherrill, signing a bill codifying them on March 25 this year, 2026. It is, again, sacrosanct to understand that this can undermine the relationship that residents have with law enforcement if law enforcement steps out of line and doesn't handle an immigration matter properly. Restoring the community trust in law enforcement is mission critical for mayors, for council, and for all other elected and appointed officials. You have to understand the concept of reduction of crime rates and complaints now. We're seeing less attendance in schools, in houses of worship, and frankly, the reporting of crimes and instances of domestic violence where people are scared that if they go to the police and complain, there may be an immigration consequence. We have to understand and we have to help people find their voice. A law enforcement officer, a police officer, and I've lectured throughout parts of the state and nationally, has to understand the cherished role that they place between their respect for law enforcement, doing their job, and to protect the interests and the safety and the emotional safety of the residents of a community. We have to also publicly emphasize that there's a firewall between local and state enforcement and DHS and ICE. They have different functions. They are not to take on the responsibility of others. And while it may be awkward and your police department may get a call from ICE or DHS that they're going to conduct certain conduct, you have to create a safe zone and make sure that everybody does feel safe. I also would like to implore upon you to have Know Your Rights trainings for non-citizens and citizens. I live a few blocks from the city, from the township or borough of Leonia. I will come back as often as you want me to have sessions like that in space that is comfortable and protected. I want to ensure that your constituents who have had their rights violated by DHS and ICE are provided legal recourse and support them as well. My law firm has a presence in Englewood, in Miami, and in Manhattan. I will make my office available as needed without fee, and I'll entertain questions up to a certain amount of minutes. All you have to do is get your mayor to call me. On regulatory issues, I think that are informative and of note to the community, for that record that's being made by this conversation, Section INA 264E basically requires all permanent residents 18 years or older to have their green card in their possession at all times. Failure to do so constitutes a misdemeanor and can lead a fine up to $100 or imprisonment of up to 30 days. I used to tell in my immigration class at Cardozo Law School that you could have a copy on your iPhone. These days, we're telling people to carry the documents with them. Foreign students must carry their I-20, their passport, their I-94s. Also, these are very important documents, and you want to make sure that people take protective measures where they place them on their person and that they're not lost. Also, under Section INA 266B, a non-citizen is guilty of a misdemeanor if they're required to advise the government of their changes of address, and they don't do it. It's actually a criminal act not to tell immigration that you've moved. Although the telling of that move might expose you, you want to make sure you get good advice from a lawyer. ICE has 22,000 personnel. These numbers are likely larger, but the estimates are predate from this session today. There are about 7,000 plus in Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, 6,000 plus in enforcement and removal operations, the ERO. There are 328 ports of entry into the United States, about 25 to 33,000 of CBP personnel. There are about approximately 225 active detention facilities in the United States with approximately 70 to 92,600 detention beds. And there are, at this time, about 67,000 non-citizens identified as meeting a criterion for arrest under the Laken Riley Act. And finally, there are about 557 immigration judges at this present time in our nation. With about 25 million people unlawfully present, there are about 557 judges to cure this broken immigration system. I've had the privilege, believe it or not, of actually representing Mrs. Trump. My late father represented John Lennon, the former Beatle, when the Nixon administration was trying to deport the famous Beatle under a drug conviction when it was for political gain. I represented President Trump's immigration matters when it came to Trump models, Miss Universe, and a whole lot during the years. And he promised that he would look at foreign students and others that are contributing to our society with a better eye. He even stated when he was campaigning that we were going to allow foreign students a path to a green card because he understood the economics of competing against people that American institutions educated. But unfortunately, the deployment of his immigration enforcement is in the hands of people that have less than generous thoughts and do not understand what was envisioned by our founding documents and parents. And it's up to us to kind of force the ledger and the line of law, whether it's through the courts or through our advocacy, in a gentlemanly and a gentlelady way. And this administration has crossed the line in the opinion of this lawyer and a lot of others throughout the nation. We have to make sure that those sworn to law enforcement, whether they be federal, state, or local officials, understand the lines, the rules of engagement, and the protections that our residents are due. And if we don't show a sense of hospitality, we're shooting ourselves in the foot, ladies and gentlemen, because this country has to get this right, and it's up to each of us. It starts in the language that we use. When I teach in the law school, I refer as non-citizens, even though the statute was written with the word alien, and illegals is what's being used now in the vernacular. The dialogue has deteriorated, where we don't treat people with the same majesty that God graced them with, the same color blood and experience. We never cared if a person prayed on a Friday, a Saturday, or a Sunday, if they had multiple language skills, or if they liked a particular cuisine or food. But we now see something that has extracted itself into the imagination. ICE had the ability within 100 miles years ago of enforcement of a border. Now, if they see somebody and I see a sound or they see a manner of dress, they are able to discriminate, and it's considered to be lawful. It's unconscionable. And until the politics changes with that pendulum going between liberalization to xenophobia, it's going to be up to the citizenry of this country to set it right. All I can say is I'm here as a measure of friendship as a neighboring mayor and as a citizen of this nation that understands that we have a lot of work to do and that it's going to start with the leadership that everybody has. Police officers and ICE agents entered into a very noble profession, but it seems to be hijacked by people that just don't get it. And it's going to be up to the citizens to make sure that we put the train back on the track. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Mayor, I'm sure there's going to be a few questions, and I appreciate what you said, particularly your volunteering to host some training sessions for non-citizens. I think that's something that we will, certainly consider and most likely take you up on. I'm kick it off with a question, then we're going to go around the dais here with my colleagues. You talked about 25 million people, 557 judges. Our Constitution, due process is guaranteed. But how long can someone be detained?
Thank you for that question, Mayor. First, I'd be happy also to do citizenship sessions so that you take the constituency of people that are green card holders that may not attain citizenship, and without fee, again, make sure we kind of encourage that and help. President Reagan, notoriously a Democrat who later in life became a Republican, in 1986 fixed our immigration law. There were 11 million people in the United States. There were 3 million people in the United States unlawfully. And he said in 1986 that if you can prove you were here before January 1 of 82, we will give you a green card. He then also created under the Immigration Reform and Control Act, the I-9 process, shifting the responsibility of policing immigration from the government to employers and punishing employers if they didn't onboard people properly within 3 days of hire. Nobody trusted it, Mayor. So everybody ended up going, never went to the federal building to do it. They had to actually open up on 24th Street in the west side of Manhattan because they felt it was a ruse to get people arrested. But he understood that 3 million people here unlawfully couldn't live in the shadows, and he fixed the immigration just so nobly, giving them full green cards if they can prove that. And then he shifted the responsibility. That's still the law of the land, by the way. We're punishing employers, taking away the biblical straw from what they need by not doing the government's job of policing immigration. And we're in many ways creating a hostile work environment between employers and people with accents who may not be comfortable with that kind of circumstance. That may have been good for an economy in 1986. Now that number has grown from 3 million to 25 million. There aren't enough beds, handcuffs, detention centers to remove 25 million people. President Obama was known as the deporter in chief. That was his nickname when he left office because he deported more people than any president in our nation's history. And the number was not an exponential of what it is now. There isn't going to be there is no way that they can remove the kind of numbers that they want. And when President Trump realized there weren't as many bad guys and they cast the net out, they ended up catching a lot of good people. And they have the audacity now to arrest people who show up to the federal building by making early morning appointments. You can bet your bottom dollar if you get a 6:30 appointment in the morning, it's because ICE wants to get it. They're lazy that they're just going to pick you up in the building when you show up. So now we have to put lawyers in every session and so forth. Now, if they have the right to do this, it's one thing. If they're going to cajole people to come in, if they're not going to fix this, it's another thing. But to answer your question, there's no way they can remove 25 million people.
The last question I have is around probable cause. The Supreme Court seems to have indicated that all you have to do is stop somebody on the basis of appearance, and that was, I believe, recently upheld. Is that the case?
Yes, unfortunately. And that means they have to come up with some articulable facts to say, well, I noticed that he had some kind of jacket or gait, or that I overheard something. They have to be able to explain that. And then once they have the person there, that's why we have to train our citizenry, whether they're here lawfully or not, when I use that term of art, in order to be able to know their rights. If an ICE agent stops you, you don't have to testify. You don't have to speak. You're at your own detriment if you aren't trained to do that. I told the Center for Food Action, if you put up a private area, a sign, they're not allowed in a private area without a warrant. So we want to get the businesses in town. We want to get the government offices, believe it or not, to kind of orient themselves that you're a legal invitee. When a postman or a post lady is allowed to come into a certain area, it's a public area. But if you mark something as private, they need a warrant to get in there. So the whole notion of their having this greater liberalization of what they can do to establish probable cause means that we have to protect and create more private areas. Now, how does the Center for Food Action or other groups actually give out foodstuffs if it's a public area? I said to them, let's create a canopy so there's no line of sight, and then put the word private area up. So there is a public area that people will muster with vehicles, and that may be open. In the family with Englewood, what I would have wanted was the ICE agents to make an arrest on the public street. It offended me to my core that in my city, as the mayor of this city, and I get videos all the time, ICE is selectively, to their credit, arresting people where they have criminal grounds, but they have the audacity to kind of tell somebody, it's the police, we have a gift for your kids. That is a breach. They don't have the means to prosecute it. We have the ability, thank God, in our practice, because of my father's legend and his scholarship, to actually bring people back where the government has made a mistake, and we are doing a lot of these different things at the same time. But I think this community, like others, has to take protective measures to create private areas and have people understand under no circumstances do you open the door. And that means people who typically leave their door open are inviting themselves to the notion that they facilitated a legitimate arrest, and they ought not to.
Thank you. Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mayor Wilds, for your time and coming out to present to us this evening. My question relates to a situation that I know is happening in Morris County right now in the township of Roxbury, where Department of Homeland Security has purchased a warehouse and is attempting to make that into a detention center. I know that their municipal attorney and their township council has attempted to file suit to stop this action. Do you believe that their legal recourse will be successful? And how do you think, if a situation like that were to happen in Leonia, do you think that how would we be able to defend ourselves?
I would fight it tooth and nail. At one point, I want you to know I had a different politic on this. Used to be that an alien would be picked up and they would ship the person out to Oakdale, Louisiana or Yorkville, Pennsylvania, because you couldn't really find talented lawyers on Madison Avenue going to Yorkville, Pennsylvania to litigate somebody. So there's a bit of change of a politic that if they open up a place and there's a detention center, then it does accord a greater volume and talent pool in the immediate tri-state area, on the one hand. On the other hand, the state will be facilitating the incarceration of somebody that is going to be detained, sometimes sadly under criminal context. I had a client in this afternoon who was held in Miami for a full year in a criminal detention center. A judge, after a year, awarded him political asylum. In a world where judges are afraid that they'll lose their job and they don't want to award asylum, the more detention centers we have, the more dangerous it is. So I would fight tooth and nail, and I think it important to make sure that they not be permitted to be there. If the governor and the state has the capability of doing it, the question is, will this create a better volume of counsel for people to draw on, because it's closer to the metropolitan area where we have a greater volume of lawyers. I know in Bergen County, the sheriff's office had a detention center for the longest time, and it made revenue for the county because of the support of ICE. But I just think there's too much of a conflict between local police and the federal authority, and it never is healthy for the neighbors.
Thank you. I have one more question.
Yeah, just before you do the other question, Council President, we represent a group, a wine company that was rated by both CBP and with ICE in recent months in the state of New Jersey, and they arrested a lot of people on site. It could be that they've set designs in the state of New Jersey and they feel that a detention center is necessary. I think we should draw the lessons that they want to do something, that there's a ripe abundancy of opportunity for ICE. And that means we have a job to do to kind of keep people aware of their rights very quickly.
Thank you. And my last question. So you spoke a lot about basically the strident political rhetoric that we've kind of encountered over the last 2 years. And my question for you is, as local leaders, what's your advice to us to kind of bring people together and restore trust in our government?
The relationship with police is mission critical. You know, I had events in Englewood and I thought I was doing the right thing by having the sheriff officer, and they have the German Shepherds. And then all of a sudden we had back to school events, and I noticed that parts of the Spanish community weren't coming to our community events, where I intended well to have sheriff's officers for kids to meet them and get coloring books. It intimidated the parents. The next year, what I ended up doing was we had back to school, and we allowed people to come to City Hall, where we have Spanish-speaking personnel, to pick up rucksacks, knapsacks. Do you know that we had on one occasion 4 generations, a great-grandparent, all the generations showing up lovingly to City Hall? We have to create that kind of safe space. It's kind of like having a mother-in-law over. You have to kind of deal with all of the politics, but you got to create a loving environment, because unless the police are really to be trusted, it could very well be a police chief will get a phone call from somebody saying ICE is on this block and that block, so that the police can keep ICE and the residents' safety and calm. I think that's the job that you have to do, Council President. You have to create a loving environment, an informed environment. You have to step away as a gentleman when ICE comes in, and I want to state it, there is an exigency circumstance. If ICE is chasing somebody, or they believe evidence will go stale, they have every right to make an impromptu arrest and breach some of the protocols that I spoke of. We want people to step out of the way so that there's no harm, no foul. We see with the deadly action that was done by 2 ICE agents on 2 innocents, the rush to license officials and not train them adequately, and the lack of prosecution or investigation on these things. We want Leonia and Palisades Park and Englewood and all the other municipalities in our county to not only be educated, but to be cordial, respectful, and to reconstitute the trust that the police have with the residents.
Thank you.
Councilmember Terrell.
Thanks for coming in, Mayor Wiles. Appreciate it. I wanted to also ask that you provide more practical tips. The one that I really appreciated was labeling public spaces into private spaces. I think that's really something that we had not considered and discussed before. I think that was really great. And I do want to reiterate our police chief has said very consistently, as well as all of the members of the executive staff, that if ICE shows up in Leonia with a warrant, that our residents are more than welcome to call the police to ask them to come and verify the validity of that warrant. And so that level of practical advice would really appreciate if you could share some more. Thank you.
By all means, Ms. Terrell, I think it's mission critical for residents and non-residents of this city, of this municipality, of this community to kind of understand what their rights are, what their obligations are. That they have to walk with documents creates a European environment that my grandparents, thank God, were able to escape. It's actually shameful in my opinion, but it is the law, and until it's rescinded, we have to kind of give them a tickler list that you must carry your green card, you must carry your student visa, and so forth. I'm happy to work with your police department on getting materials. There are materials from law schools and clinics and all sorts of other people that you can put under the banner of the borough so that your community is disseminating information that's been vetted by other authorities. And I think hosting sessions, and it's easier obviously for me to do them by Zoom, where people from the privacy of their home can have it. And then I'll make time in the privacy of my law office, which is a protected space, to see residents in a certain evening or daytime, depending even on weekends if necessary as well. I give lectures to many of the schools that I lecture, and then students who have seen my lecture get a 15-minute free consultation with either a lawyer or a professional in my office on the house as well. I can come up with things that will be practical, and I think that the dissemination of information in public spots and spaces and putting it on your website and social media and showing the source of the information and keeping an eye on it in case the law changes is mission critical.
Councilman Grindelis.
Thank you, Mayor Wiles, for coming. I appreciate this. I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to say that I think these conversations are important. The one thing that I took away from this was your sort of awareness of when you think you're doing something good, like with the sheriff and the dogs, you may be actually doing something wrong. And I think these conversations sort of allow us to look at things a little differently. But I think, your lecture was great, and you answered my one question that I had, which was, what's changed? And I think you had already answered that question.
I think, Mr. Grindelis, if I may, it's a function of there's a sense of humility. My grandparents, my father one day didn't vote so quickly. My grandfather called him. He was across the street in Forest Hills from where he had to vote. My father said, "My vote doesn't make a difference, Dad." And my grandfather, my Zadie, said, "That's because you're a citizen by chance. I'm a citizen by choice." I think that we have to understand, we have to elevate the way we talk about people so that they understand the majesty of being alive, being healthy, and in a country that wants to see them have opportunity. And at the same time, we have to make sure that we understand and appreciate the circumstance that they're in. When I represented Mrs. Trump, I said to her, "You're entitled, like everybody else, to have babysitting services so that while you do the people's work, your son could be raised by your parents and that they can be citizens in this country." It wasn't the notion of chain migration, the visual of monkeys in a jungle trying to kind of chase themselves in here. And she allowed me, to her credit, to push back on the president when he was scaring the hell out of everybody in this country. So I think we have to find our voice. We have to stand nobly and make sure that the laws that are on the books, not just the laws prosecuting people for small stuff, but the way we treat people with a sense of humanity comes back, and we can do it.
Councilman Hesselbrink.
Thank you, Mr. Wiles, for coming here tonight. You answered many of my questions, but one I have is to make it also more practical. Can we coordinate as council people across towns? Because sometimes in our own bubble, right? We're in Leonia and we're doing Leonia things, but we're so small, and Englewood is bigger, but not that big. Do you see any opportunities to have this topic coordinated in a way between municipalities?
This is where I actually trust the political process, Mr. Hesselbrink. I think it's so important for us to kind of find a safe, in my faith, they call it parav. It's not one, it's not the other. It's kind of a comfortable zone. And I think we have to try to get people where they're happy. I don't like the notion of elected officials dealing with immigration because it has that veneer like the sheriff with the uniform and the dogs, and it may not be accepted, and it may be uncomfortable because there'll be security and safety officials over there. I like immigration sessions really in places of faith, houses of worship, in mosques and churches and synagogues and temples. I think it's a more comfortable environment to do that. And then you invite all the council representatives and they can meet under that umbrella, but it has to be in a safe space.
Councilmember Scarangella?
Thank you very much for all the information you provided, and I appreciate what you're saying, I really do. A couple of questions. One, you provided a lot of really solid information about statutes and what's legal and what, earlier, and it was very fast. I'm wondering if you have that in a form that I could easily access it and really look at it, because it was rich, and I really missed a lot of pieces in there, and I really liked it. So if you can provide that, that would be great.
My pleasure. I'd be happy.
The other thing I'm wondering if you can provide is, I know that there are situations where people need to be able to protect their children. If something happens, they need to be able to say, this is the person my child's going to be taken care of. I know there has to be templates for that. If you have those templates for guardianship, or in case someone's taken, or pets taken care of, or what to do with a car, or just basic things that if someone is detained, they have all the pieces of their life at least still taken care of. If you have templates for that, that would be very helpful. Just a link to something that is easy for us to be able to use if we needed to, or be able to disseminate if we needed to. Lastly, it has to do with something you did mention about Governor Sherrill having signed in two bills that were not signed in earlier. They're slightly different form as part of the Immigrant Trust Act. I'm wondering if the Attorney General has released policies with regard to those bills yet, because I think we can see what those bills say, but they're not really defined, and they reference policies that I haven't seen. So I'm wondering if you know if those policies have been issued in any way that we can access. And thank you in
My
advance.
pleasure. Thank you, Ms. Camangella. I would be happy to email the mayor my talking points, because they're all bulleted out and it should give you food for fodder. But I would caution you, and I'm doing this so on the record, that this is a snapshot as the law is today, April 2026, and should not be disseminated in this form, because I don't want anybody to hold this as the gospel. Number two, I'm an immigration lawyer by trade, a mayor, a law professor. I'm an EMT in New York with Hatzalah, Jewish Volunteer Ambulance Service, for 30-something years. I'm not a criminal lawyer. I'm not a corporate lawyer. I'm not a family lawyer. I don't have templates in those other areas. I can tell you the best way to protect children is to make sure that people take a consultation with an immigration lawyer and with a family lawyer, both. Those protective measures will overlap in different spaces. You talked about cars to protect their goods. The government has every right in forfeiture actions. I was a federal prosecutor to take things in furtherance of crimes. There was a young lady who consulted with our office about 2 months ago. She was driving in Florida. She was unlawfully present in the United States. The family bought her a car. They arrested her at a street light and they seized the car. They deported her and they seized the car in forfeiture action as it was in furtherance of illegal conduct. I had a couple who called on me in my office in Manhattan. They're Englewood residents, and they asked if I would take custody of their children if immigration picked them up as their mayor. These things have to seriously be thought out. And children of parents who are in your school system, or parents that are living in your township or work in your township or come through, have to kind of think of the big picture and who's going to be responsible and for what. That means they need an emergency action plan. If one parent gets picked up, if both parents get picked up, if there's any vulnerability. Certainly going to bus stops, another more practical thing, as you alluded to, people should be staying away from airports and bus terminals. And I'm not going to teach people how to evade capture in a nation that has the greatest sense of hospitality within a few nautical miles of Lady Liberty herself. But the thesis is you can protect kids, but with the right lawyers, not an immigration lawyer in the family space. And forfeiture actions and assets also need to be protected because they won't be taken away from them. You can be deported and your assets will remain. You need other people to help execute on that. And finally, with regard to Governor Sherrill's AG and the policies, I'm not up on that. And I would defer to the good governor in her office to see if they are going to put more flesh on the skeleton. It's good of her. She visited Englewood a few weeks ago to have even addressed this, to give comfort to the many parts of our state, particularly those with accents and again, who are here by God's grace.
Thank you. Councilman Ravid.
Mayor, thank you very much for the presentation. As an economist, and now I realize we're teaching in the same university as well, the points that you've made are extremely well taken, have not changed over the years. I mean, many studies show that there's very little substitution in the jobs that illegal immigrants take versus Americans. Americans don't want these jobs. That was the same during the time of Reagan, and it is the same today. And the other issue which you mentioned is the fact that, you know, it's obvious and makes a lot of sense for the U.S. to welcome people who were educated in other countries. So the other countries took on all the education burden, and they come here and become professionals and help the country. There are Nobel laureates in economics, for example. There are people from Israel, Turkey, and other countries on the council. We have two of us at least, right? I think just the two of us. Yeah. And the other thing is that, and you mentioned that too a little bit, that it leads to exploitation. The fact that somebody is illegal just means from an economic point of view that you can pay them less. And the side effect, as you mentioned, your last example, people don't want to apply for licenses, and there are a lot of bad externalities. So this whole situation is really out of control, and I don't think, you know, the way to resolve it is deport 25 million people, as you said. Now, since I'm the last to, so I very much appreciate your talk, and as the last person, most of the issues I wanted to address have been already addressed, but I would like just to focus on one little thing. Both the council president and 2 or 3 others asked about what we can do. So the question is, within the very complex legal system that that governs this issue on the federal, state, and local level, is there any role, specific role for councils and mayors, in addition to the fact that you say treat them with humanity and you know, try to tell people, you know, create private spaces, etc.
Sure. Well, first, your comments are very much appreciated, Mr. Ravid. We need people to pick the blueberries in the fields of Georgia and to make the beds in our hospitality corridors. Concentration only on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and the Band-Aids that they're trying to fix with our business immigration visas is so nobly needed. Welcoming the educated and employee is a function of not just utility, but it's foolish. So many foreign nationals become green card holders and citizens, and then they employ U.S. citizens. So we don't understand the evolution of the majesty of what our founding parents envisioned, where a person would come, get a visa, get a green card, become a citizen, and then bring people over here in that noble experience of family unification, not chain migration. There is a schizophrenia, and I think you coined it well. There is a schizophrenia in the workforce because in many of the visas, particularly the H-1B, the professional work visa, employers have to post in places of recognition that there's a job available, the rate of pay, in case an American may happen along. We see in the labor certification, the application for permanent resident, where you have to run ads to show that there are no ready, able, and willing Americans. So on the one hand, we're trying to fight with the Labor Department protocols and immigration hand in hand to protect Americans. On the other hand, we tell employers, if you're going to do an H-1B, you have to provide a prevailing wage for a foreign national. So an employer is confused. Am I trying to help an American get the job, or am I trying to protect the interests of a foreign national? And sometimes you can create a hostile work environment if you add all kinds of factors into it with the kind of politics and the kind of social mores that we have. And it's creating too much of a burden to employers, where President Reagan 100 years ago tried to remove one problem, created another problem, and we haven't fixed what President Reagan did for that economy, which isn't our economy now. So those side effects are unimaginable. But going down to your bottom line question, what can we do other than creating safe spaces? There is a preemption doctrine in our law, where federal law preempts a state or a local municipality from getting involved in immigration. I think we have to understand that our police officers and our law enforcement officials do not have the lexicon, the time, the bandwidth to prosecute or even to learn U.S. immigration law to do it properly. We have to come to that notion that it's not their job. We also have to understand that no state government or federal government can interfere under the preemption doctrine in the zone that we're involved in. And we have to kind of revel in that. I would like to see the borough of Leonia, the city of Englewood, New Jersey, and all the other municipalities start enfranchising the persons who live in their city in a way that nobody can stop you from doing it. I don't know what you can do, but I'm sure there are half a dozen things that you can do. You can give admission to your library and a special card to people that are undocumented, consistent with driver's licenses and the things that are there, so you're not creating any security breach, or they're not going to use that ID improperly throughout the state. Find out what the state umbrella allows for identification and come up with some identification card for people in Leonia that are not citizens that may want to have something. You're enfranchising and giving somebody the nobility where they can actually take their family to a zoo on a Sunday, or they can take out a book and be trusted as a person when they go to a library with a child. And they may be embarrassed, but when they start learning the borough of Leonia is permitting certain conduct under the preemption doctrine, that people are preempted from telling us what we want to do in our municipality. And I'll work with your lawyer to make sure that it fits all the different equations that are there. So if you want to step out and have the audacity to be even better than others, there are ways I think that you can meet that. And I'd be happy to do it in Englewood as well.
Thank you again, Mayor. Really appreciate your comments. That concludes the presentation. So I want to whatever you want to do. You can stay here, and if time permits, you can hear the public comments period, which comes next. What we'll do, just to remind everybody, is 2 minutes per speaker. If you're online and wish to participate, you hit the hand icon at the bottom of your screen. The clerk will let me know you wish to be recognized. We're going to start with the people in the room, but the ground rules are going to be, just so it's perfectly clear, everybody comes up one after another for 2 minutes, because we still have a regular work session meeting tonight. We will take notes on what people say. It will be documented as part of the official minutes. If the mayor is still here, I will invite him to comment in general on some of the things that he heard. Otherwise, we will capture everything and we will try to answer what we can, later. So who would like to be the first person to speak in the room? Familiar face. Come on up. Yeah. Shelley, and just hit the, yeah, it should still be on. If The green light's there. Name and address for your for the record, please.
Shelley Perino, 105 Leonia Avenue. So here's my question. In the scenario that Mayor Wilds described, where there was a person pounding at the door for the family, claiming to be the police, the family let them in. Had that happened in Leonia, and had the family called the Leonia police, I'm curious what training they've had to respond to ICE or how they interact with ICE. And that is all.
Thank you.
My question.
I'll just be writing notes. Who wants to be next? Donna?
Hi, Donna Ratchick, 342 Park Avenue. Thanks so much for coming. That's really great. We've had several trainings and things here in town, and we had an immigration lawyer come and talk to us, and she advised people who were interested to get their notary license. As far as I know, we have 3 people that I can think of offhand that have done it. And the idea was, but we don't have anything set up yet, is that perhaps what we can do is if someone is detained and they have to, and what is it called, habeas, that we could help file, that we could be some sort of assistant. And if somebody needed, for us, I'm just telling you, I haven't gotten mine, but to go to the house to fill anything out. And I'm just going to throw that out there. I don't know if there's something that, again, as a town, that you can advise us and that we can help in some ways, please. Thanks.
Thank you, Donna. Who wants to be next? Please.
Hi, my name is Jiwon Kim, 185 Harrison Street. My question is, so a non-citizen should carry their ID, their green cards and whatnot. I am a citizen, but I am obviously an immigrant. So what do I do?
So you said you're a citizen,
Yeah,
a
I'm
green card?
citizen,
Okay,
but
thank
I'm an
you.
immigrant, obviously. So what do I do? Do
Okay.
I carry my papers?
Thank you. Jonathan, is there anybody online? Okay. Great. Mike?
Michael Perino, 105 Leonia Avenue. Thank you for that very informative presentation. The distinction you made, I think, which is the most important one, is the difference between a judicial and an administrative warrant. And the distinction there is the ability to go into private spaces versus public spaces. The question is, I think we need a lot more detail if we're going to give advice to the residents of Leonia about where that line is between the public and the private. And you can think of a number of areas that don't fit neatly into either category. The property surrounding a private home, the common spaces in a multifamily dwelling, commercial spaces, any spaces within those commercial spaces. All of those, having some detail on exactly where that administrative warrant can reach into would be wonderful to give to the people of Leonia who might want some advice on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for your presentation. My name is Maria Monega Rosario. I live on 119 Hopeless Lane. I'm a Leonia High School senior. I'm 17 years old, and I'm one of I created with a group of friends of mine an organization called RISE. It's all surrounding about teaching and educating the community about our rights and what we should do in these unprecedented times. And so I really do appreciate your presentation. I thank you so much, Mr. Mayor, for inviting us to come and join, and everybody who came to our event. In our event, we had immigration lawyers, we had the Leonia Police Department, and many other organizations who help in regards to immigration and helping other community members. But my question for you is, as a young person, as a young adult, what are some things that we should be teaching our peers around our age or younger to be doing? What are some really important information that we should be giving out? I know that there's a lot of information, a lot of jobs that our elected officials will be doing, but what are some things as us, as our kind of organization, that we want to keep on communicating with the community? What are some really important things that we should have, just so that we can keep that in mind and give that advice out to the people who really need it? Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Closing the public comments period. Thank you very much. With the mayor still here, I don't know if you took notes. I did too. So if you want to make some general comments in response, that would be great.
Again, forgive my back. Shelley Perino talked about training ICE to respond. How would a police officer in Leonia have responded had ICE knocked on the door? Would they be able to kind of guide people through that kind of process? Well, they ought to. It's not a police responsibility to kind of master this. It's a citizen's responsibility. And I say citizen as a generic term. Everybody should understand what the rules of engagement are. Nobody should open the door unless you want to open the door. And if the police are out there and ICE wears jackets with the acronym ICE and it says police, you don't have to open the door unless they have a warrant. It's the hardest thing in the world to get to a point where somebody with a weapon and a badge is outside your house and you don't open the door. You have to train people to resist. And I've trained my clients, I've trained church leaders and citizens, almost citizens, that is, how to deal with that. The police department ought to know if somebody calls up and says that there are ICE agents at my door, what should I do? Then the Leonia Police Department should be able to read a transcript to a resident and explain what the right rule is. Again, if there's an exigency and the ICE has every right to go in there without a warrant, if they're chasing somebody or they feel that there's a risk to the evacuation of somebody or some form of evidence. Otherwise, they have no right for admission. You give up territory you cannot recapture. You can't prosecute or litigate it, unfortunately, in the environment that we're in. But it was a very appropriate question, Shelley. Donna Redcheck spoke about nobly becoming a notary for being able to help residents file habeases. We have habeas petitions. This is a federal right of action, fundamentally to ask the government to prove that they have the right to hold somebody. They'll arrest somebody in the tri-state area and they'll move them to Texas very quickly because immigration to their own interest, and it is a very important and yet noble policy consideration, have to take measures to protect themselves. They don't want people to know about their methods and procedures where the safety of their offices are at issue. I have a big issue with the masking and the wearing of hats by agents, and by the way, with protesters also in the last round of politics in our nation. But the thesis is very simple. These federal actions are very important, and having a notary show up to a home to swear out information in front of a notary could be useful, but you need to have a lawyer that really will be filing notaries, and you need to be able to organize the statements under the umbrella of a lawyer as to what documents you should be getting. It's wonderful that there are people that want to become notaries just for that sake, but you're just identifying that the person was there. Be sure under state law, I believe, a notary now has to keep a log, who it was, when it was. You want to make sure that you keep good, copious notes so that if you have to give that over to an authority, you can do that. Donna, it's a noble thing that you're doing. I'm talking backwards, but At the same time, it's inadequate if you're not being tasked to do so. Try to find other lawyers, immigration lawyers in the area. The American Immigration Lawyers Association, of which my father was their leader in 1970. It's a national association of about 18,000 immigration lawyers, if not more. I'll let them know that you stand ready in the borough of Leonia to help. Jiwon Kim spoke about non-citizens having to carry their documents and green cards. Do I, as a U.S. citizen, have to carry my documents? It's an unbelievable question to me, because when I visit Europe, I have to give my passport over to a hotel clerk. As an American citizen, you do not have to carry any documentation. It's unfathomable to me that you would be worried, but we've created an environment where so many people are worried about things they ought not to be worried about. I can't tell you how many people have consulted with me. I became a citizen, but I'm worried about something that happened when I had a visa or after my green card. It came up in the citizenship application, but I'm worried that they're going to stop me. There is no right to privacy in an airport. Forgive my back. But if you are in an airport and somebody wants to stop you and give you a hard time, they have every right, for a lot of other law enforcement reasons, to go through your telephone, to start asking questions, and to push back. You're only required to have documentation that would get you through TSA on a domestic flight or internationally with a passport and so forth. But you do not have any responsibility whatsoever to be carrying any documents. In fact, you're entitled to a day in federal court in case there's a question as to whether or not you're an American citizen. Don't worry about it in the least bit. There are a lot of people that do worry about it, and I've gone through protective measures to develop people's voice and a sense of understanding so that they aren't paranoid based on, and I'm not calling you paranoid, but I understand the tone of the question. And it doesn't matter if you were born a citizen, if you naturalized into a citizen. Once you're a citizen, there's no requirement. Mike Perino, no doubt related to Shelley Perino. There was a Don Perino who was our code enforcement officer, not related. Judicial versus administrative, the public versus private kind of experience. Look, very different culture, whether it's a home or it's a commercial enterprise. You have to understand, if it's a home, you're inviting mailmen and mail personnel to come onto your property, and they're legally entitled, as I remember from my property class, as legal invitees. If you own a restaurant, you're inviting people to patronize your restaurant. So immigration has every right to go where the public has the right to go, unless you mark it differently. In a restaurant, if you're going to mark an area as private, it should make sense. But does that allow ICE and immigration into your restaurant? Absolutely. You can put up a sign, everybody welcome except for ICE. But if you have a public area, they're going to avail that. Now, let me tell you a little gimmick, because I was a federal prosecutor and I went on raids with immigration. To avoid the appearance of impropriety, you can expect that ICE will not only raid the back of a restaurant, but they may go through the front of the restaurant and ask people that are enjoying their soup and their vegetables to see their papers, so they avoid the appearance that they were only looking for a particular person, ethnicity or otherwise. So you have to be prepared, no matter what kind of business it is in the borough of Leonia, to make sure that businesses that have high traffic, pedestrian traffic, understand and meet with a lawyer and come up with a plan that can be protected. And also that means putting cameras that are authorized by state law so that they can document if they want to push back on an unlawful arrest or dragnet by immigration. Immigration has people wear wires. They can conduct all kinds of surveillance before they would make arrests or do something. And you want to have a very practical experience, Mr. Perino, as to that. And it will be different based on the kind of traffic and pedestrian needs of certain restaurants. Maria Rosario spoke about this group of young people called RISE. what can we teach peers her age? The same thing we're teaching people my age and all ages, and that is find the voice for the person you're talking to. Give them a hug, put them in the hands of a capable lawyer, try to discern as best as you can the challenges they have, and then make sure that those professionals give people the best advice possible. George Washington said when he stood down after being president 2 terms, that he returned to the more important station in life, and that's the citizen of this country. We have to understand that with citizenship comes great responsibility, and one of them is making sure that we address peers of all ages, that we find their voice, their confidence, and that they have good advice. Mayor, I will leave Mr. Kim's garbage collection and Lionel's helmet collection to your good judgment. And I beg your pardon if I do leave after my remarks.
Thank you. And
Thank you.